Picture this, a dimly lit chamber, hidden from the outside world, where robed figures move in precise unison, whispering words passed down through centuries. This isn't the setting of a Gothic novel, it's the reality of Freemasonry, one of history's most secretive and enduring brotherhoods. For hundreds of years, the rituals of the Freemasons have been shrouded in mystery, sparking endless speculation, admiration, and even fear. What really happens behind those closed doors? Why have these ceremonies survived wars, revolutions, and the relentless march of time? And what secrets do they hold about power, symbolism, and the human quest for meaning? The Freemasons' rituals are more than just elaborate performances. They're a living link to a hidden past, a tapestry woven with cryptic symbols, sacred geometry, and allegories that stretch back to the builders of antiquity. From the dramatic raising of a new initiate to the solemn oaths sworn under penalty of unimaginable consequences, every gesture, every word carries weight. These ceremonies have been accused of everything from devil worship to political conspiracy, yet their true purpose remains debated even among historians. Some see them as a moral compass, a way to guide men toward virtue. Others believe they guard secrets that could rewrite history itself. But here's what's truly fascinating: the Freemasons' influence is everywhere, hiding in plain sight. Their symbols adorn our currency, their members have shaped nations, and their rituals echo in the architecture of our most iconic buildings. Yet despite their prominence, the inner workings of their rites remain a closely guarded mystery. So what's really going on? Are these rituals mere tradition, or do they hold deeper truths? In this journey, we'll peel back the layers of secrecy, exploring the origins, the symbolism, and the controversies that have made Freemasonry a subject of fascination for centuries. By the end, you'll see these ancient ceremonies in a whole new light and perhaps uncover questions you never thought to ask. The truth is waiting. Let's begin. The roots of Freemasonry stretch back through time like the winding corridors of an ancient cathedral, shrouded in half-light, where history and legend blur together. While many tie its beginnings to the stoneworkers' guilds of medieval Europe, the truth is far more fascinating. Picture the construction sites of the Middle Ages, where master masons passed down secret techniques for shaping stone, using handshakes and passwords to identify skilled craftsmen. These operative masons built castles and cathedrals, but their legacy would evolve into something far more mysterious. By the 1600s, something remarkable happened. The lodges, once practical gatherings of working stonemasons, began admitting men who had never lifted a chisel. Lawyers, scholars, even nobility were drawn to the symbolism and philosophy hidden within the craft. This was the birth of speculative masonry, where tools like the square and compass became metaphors for moral living rather than literal building instruments. The Regius poem, a manuscript dating back to 1390, hints at this shift with its blend of trade regulations and moral teachings. Then there's the Cook manuscript from the early 1400s, which weaves together biblical lore, architectural secrets, and cryptic rules, laying the groundwork for what would become modern Freemasonry. Among the shadowy figures of this transformation stands Elias Ashmole, the 17th century antiquarian and alchemist. His diary entry from 1646 marks one of the first recorded initiations of a non-operative Mason, a moment that crystallized the transition from craft guild to philosophical brotherhood. Yet even as speculative lodges flourished in London coffeehouses, whispers persisted of even older origins. Some pointed to the Knights Templar, others to the builders of King Solomon's Temple, or even to the mystery schools of antiquity. What's undeniable is this: Freemasonry didn't emerge from a single moment, but rather grew like a living tradition, absorbing symbols, stories, and secrets across centuries. Its true beginnings may never be fully uncovered, and perhaps that's exactly how the fraternity intended it. London, 1717, a year that would change the course of secret societies forever. In a modest tavern called the Goose and Gridiron, just a stone's throw from St. Paul's Cathedral, 4 old lodges of stonemasons did something unprecedented. They gathered not to discuss the construction of buildings, but to lay the foundation for something far grander, the first Grand Lodge of England. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the moment Freemasonry stepped out of the shadows of medieval guilds and into the modern age as a formalized fraternity. At the helm was Anthony Sayer, elected as the first Grand Master, a man whose name would echo through Masonic history. But why did this gathering matter so much? Before 1717, Freemasonry was a patchwork of local traditions, with each lodge operating under its own rituals and rules. The formation of the Grand Lodge changed everything. It became the architect of uniformity, standardizing ceremonies, degrees, and symbols across all lodges. Imagine a secret language suddenly given a dictionary. This was the birth of a shared Masonic identity. The impact rippled outward like concentric circles in a sacred geometry diagram. Within decades, Grand Lodges sprouted across Europe, from France to the Netherlands, each adopting the London model while adapting to local cultures. But the real explosion came across the Atlantic. Freemasonry didn't just travel to the American colonies, it became woven into the very fabric of the Revolution. Men like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin weren't just members, they were lodge masters, applying Masonic ideals of enlightenment and brotherhood to nation building. Yet here's the paradox: the more Freemasonry spread, the tighter its inner secrets were held. The Grand Lodge system created a perfect balance, public enough to attract influential members, yet impenetrable enough to maintain mystery. Its constitutions, penned by Reverend James Anderson in 1723, became the fraternity's blueprint, blending biblical law with the Enlightenment's rationality. But behind the polished rituals lay a brilliant strategy. By codifying its practices, Freemasonry ensured its survival. Wars could topple kingdoms, but this brotherhood's foundations were laid in symbols, not stone, and symbols are far harder to erase. What began in a London tavern became a silent revolution, shaping minds from Parisian salons to frontier log cabins. The Grand Lodge didn't just organize Freemasonry, it gave the ancient craft a new language, one that would whisper across centuries. Walk into any Masonic lodge, and you'll find yourself surrounded by a silent language, a tapestry of symbols whispering secrets older than the buildings themselves. At the center of it all are the square and compass, perhaps the most recognizable emblems of Freemasonry. But these aren't just tools, they're profound metaphors. The square represents morality, the compass boundaries of wisdom, and together they form a framework for living, an architectural plan for the soul. Every initiate learns that these instruments aren't meant to measure stone, but to shape character, reminding members to square their actions and keep passions within due bounds. Then there's the all-seeing eye, hovering above an unfinished pyramid, an image familiar to anyone who's examined a United States $1 bill. Far from being some ominous surveillance symbol in Masonic tradition, it represents divine providence, the idea that a higher principle watches over human endeavors. This symbol traces its roots through Renaissance Hermeticism, Egyptian iconography, and even the biblical concept of God's omnipresence. It's a reminder that true enlightenment comes with accountability, that every thought and deed exists within a grander design. But the symbolism goes deeper still. The checkerboard floor of Masonic lodges, with its alternating black and white tiles, mirrors the dualities of life, light and dark, good and evil, knowledge and ignorance. Winding its way across this surface is the indented tassel, a rope with 7 knots symbolizing the unity binding all Masons, no matter where they hail from. Even the pillars at the lodge entrance, bows and jachin, modeled after those of Solomon's temple, aren't merely decorative. They stand for strength and establishment, but also the balance between opposites, active and passive, masculine and feminine, the tangible and the ineffable. Perhaps most intriguing are the symbolic links to ancient wisdom traditions. The Masonic ladder with its 3 rungs, faith, hope, and charity, echoes the Kabbalistic tree of life's ascending path. The acacia plant, used in rituals to represent immortality, connects to Hermetic beliefs about the soul's eternal nature. Even the apron, that simple lambskin garment worn by every Mason, harks back to the leather protectors of operative stonemasons, transformed into an emblem of purity, a shield against moral corruption. These symbols weren't invented, they were inherited, layered with meaning across centuries. A medieval stonemason's plumb line becomes a lesson in integrity. The rough ashlar, an uncut stone, transforms into the human condition, awaiting the careful blows of self-improvement to become perfect. Every object, every gesture in Masonic ritual is a doorway to contemplation, a puzzle meant to provoke thought rather than provide easy answers. That's the brilliance of this system. It doesn't preach morality outright, but invites the seeker to uncover it piece by piece, just as a mason shapes raw stone into something enduring. So when you see these symbols carved into buildings or hidden in plain sight, remember, they're not just relics of a secret society. They're fragments of a conversation that stretches back to the dawn of civilization, a visual language teaching that wisdom isn't found in loud proclamations but in quiet observation. The true secret, these symbols don't conceal, they reveal, but only to those willing to look beyond the surface. The journey into Freemasonry unfolds like an ancient 3-act play, each degree peeling back layers of wisdom through symbolism and ritual. It begins with the entered apprentice, where a seeker stands at the threshold, literally and figuratively blindfolded, symbolizing spiritual darkness. The knock of the ceremonial gavel echoes like a call to awakening. This isn't just an initiation, it's a rebirth. The candidate is led in circumambulation, tracing the path of the sun, while rough textures beneath his feet remind him of life's obstacles. Then comes the moment of revelation, the hoodwink removed, and for the first time he sees the lodge's sacred geometry bathed in light. But the true transformation lies in the oath sworn on a sacred text, often a volume of scripture, with hands placed on the square and compass. The penalties described are archaic and severe, not literal threats but metaphors for the cost of betraying trust. Through this rite, the apprentice learns that Masonry isn't about secrets kept, but truths revealed, lessons in humility, labor, and the tools to build a virtuous life. Advancement to fellow craft shifts the focus from moral foundations to intellectual pursuit. Here, the winding staircase becomes the central symbol, its 3, 5, and 7 steps representing the liberal arts and sciences. The initiate no longer enters blindfolded. Now he must observe intently, deciphering the lodge's symbols with newfound clarity. His journey mirrors the ancient craftsmen who studied astronomy, geometry, and philosophy to perfect their art. A dramatic pause comes at the midpoint of the lodge, where pillars reminiscent of Solomon's temple stand guard. One is crowned with a celestial globe, the other with terrestrial dualities of knowledge and existence. The fellow craft's oath deepens his commitment, binding him to shared exploration rather than mere obedience. This degree whispers an essential truth: wisdom isn't given, it's climbed toward one step at a time, with each turn of the staircase revealing broader horizons. But it's the Master Mason degree that carries Freemasonry's most profound and haunting allegory. The ceremony reenacts the legend of Hiram Abiff, the mythical architect of Solomon's temple, who chose death rather than betray his sacred trust. The initiate undergoes a symbolic reenactment of Hiram's fate, a dramatic death and resurrection that echoes ancient mystery traditions. The lodge plunges into darkness, only the glow of a single candle remains. The tools of the degree, the trowel, the plumb, the level, take on solemn meaning as instruments not of construction, but of reconciliation between mortality and eternity. When the candidate rises, it's not just as a member, but as a custodian of the craft's deepest mysteries. the three ruffians who sought Hiram's secrets become emblems of ignorance, fanaticism, and tyranny, forces every master mason must spiritually overcome. These degrees aren't mere formalities, they're psychological archetypes dressed in ritual. The blindfold, the staircase, the dramatic raising, each element transforms abstract virtues into visceral experience. What begins as a lesson in moral rectitude culminates in a confrontation with life's greatest questions. What will we sacrifice for integrity? How do we build meaning amid mortality's uncertainties? The degrees don't provide answers so much as frameworks for seeking them, using symbols as mirrors for the self. From the apprentice's first fumbling steps to the master's solemn grasp of the trowel meant to spread the cement of brotherly love, each initiation etches wisdom not just into memory but into the bone. This is education as the ancients understood it, not facts recited but truths enacted, where the temple being built is the initiate's own soul. Among the most enduring legends in Freemasonry is the tragic tale of Hiram Abiff, the master architect said to have designed King Solomon's temple. According to Masonic tradition, Hiram possessed secret knowledge, divine wisdom passed down from the heavens themselves, allowing him to construct a sanctuary so perfect it would bridge earth and the divine. But this knowledge came at a price. Three rogue craftsmen, desperate to steal these sacred secrets for themselves, ambushed Hiram at the temple's unfinished gates. They demanded the master's word, the password granting access to higher mysteries, but Hiram refused, choosing death over betrayal. His final words, according to the ritual, were chilling. "Better my life be taken than the secrets of a master mason." The story unfolds with almost Shakespearean gravity. Each assailant strikes Hiram with a mason's tool, the setting maul, the square, and finally, the compass, symbolizing the escalating violence of ignorance against wisdom. His body is buried hastily beneath acacia branches, a plant long associated with immortality in ancient cultures. When King Solomon's search party discovers the crime, they find not just a corpse but a revelation. The uprooted acacia has bloomed against all odds, a potent symbol that truth can never truly be destroyed. But this isn't just a morality tale about loyalty. The legend operates on multiple levels of meaning. On one hand, it's an allegory for the human condition. Every initiate who reenacts Hiram's fate in the Master Mason degree is symbolically experiencing the cycle of death and rebirth. The tools used against Hiram transform into instruments of enlightenment. The maul that kills becomes the gavel that molds character. The square that strikes becomes the measure of integrity. Even the acacia takes on new life, representing the soul's resilience against brute force. Deeper still, the myth echoes ancient initiation rites from Eleusis to Egypt, where candidates underwent symbolic deaths to be reborn into higher knowledge. Hiram's refusal to surrender his secrets mirrors the trials of figures like Odysseus resisting the sirens or Socrates drinking hemlock rather than abandoning philosophy. There's also a striking parallel to the biblical story of the widows. Might Hiram's sacrifice suggests that true wisdom isn't in possessing secrets, but in valuing them beyond life itself. The legend's most profound layer may be its commentary on the nature of divine knowledge. In some interpretations, Hiram represents not just a man, but the fragmented light of enlightenment scattered by human folly. His murder symbolizes how greed and impatience corrupt sacred truths, reducing them to superstition or empty ritual. The search for his body mirrors humanity's endless quest to reconstruct lost wisdom piece by piece, generation after generation. Modern Masons see Hiram's story as a blueprint for living. His fidelity under pressure becomes a model for personal integrity. The acacia's miraculous growth offers hope that even in darkness, principles can take root. And the temple he never finished building, that becomes the most potent symbol of all, a reminder that the work of self-improvement is never truly complete, that every person is both the architect and the unfinished temple, constantly under construction. This is why the legend endures. Hiram Abiff isn't just a figure from myth, he's a mirror held up to every seeker. His story asks uncomfortable questions. What would we sacrifice for our deepest convictions? How do we rebuild when truth seems buried? And in a world full of shortcuts, who among us would choose the acacia, the harder path, knowing it might lead to our symbolic grave before offering resurrection? The answers aren't given but earned, just as Hiram earned his place not through the secrets he kept, but the principles he refused to abandon. In a world before ID cards and digital verification, Freemasons developed an intricate system of silent communication, a way to recognize brothers across continents and centuries without uttering a single public word. At the heart of this system lie the secret handshakes, or grips, each as distinct as a fingerprint. Picture two strangers meeting in a foreign land. One presses his thumb against the other's knuckle in a specific pattern, the other responds with a counter-pressure. If matched perfectly, the unspoken bond is confirmed. These aren't arbitrary gestures. The entered apprentice's grip, for example, mimics the way stonemasons once tested the stability of a fellow worker on scaffolding, practical origins transformed into symbolic language. But the recognition goes beyond touch. Masons also use visual signs, like the way a hand is placed over the heart or drawn across the throat, movements that might seem ordinary to outsiders but carry weighty meaning within the craft. These signs often correspond to the penalties described in initiation oaths, serving as visceral reminders of a Mason's solemn promises. Then there are the passwords, whispered phrases like bows or tubal cain, names drawn from biblical lore and the mythical history of craftsmanship. In medieval lodges, these words functioned as literal keys, proving a traveler's right to wages and lodging. Today, they're more about continuity, threads connecting modern Masons to the guilds of the past. The brilliance of these methods lies in their adaptability. In hostile environments where Freemasonry was banned, like 18th century Catholic Europe or Soviet Russia, modified grips and signs allowed brothers to communicate under the radar. Some variations were even tailored to specific regions. A Scottish lodge might use a subtle thumb movement distinct from an English one, adding another layer of secrecy. The system became so refined that during the American Revolution, Masonic recognition signs allegedly helped distinguish friend from foe on chaotic battlefields. Yet for all their historical intrigue, these clandestine tools serve a deeper purpose in modern lodges. Beyond mere identification, they create what anthropologists call communitas, a sense of shared experience that transcends social hierarchies. When a corporate CEO and a tradesman exchange the same grip, the outside world's distinctions momentarily dissolve. The rituals surrounding these secrets, the careful teaching from mentor to initiate, the solemnity with which they're guarded, reinforce that Masonry isn't about exclusion, but about the value of what's shared. Interestingly, the obsession with hidden knowledge has also made Freemasonry a target. From the notorious Morgan Affair of 1826, when an ex-Mason threatened to publish the grips and passwords, sparking violent backlash, to modern conspiracy theories, these private signals have often been misunderstood as proof of sinister control. The truth is far more human. Like any group with guarded traditions, from military units to ancient craft guilds, Freemasons preserve these methods not to conceal dark plots, but to maintain the intimacy of a centuries-old conversation. What survives today is less about secrecy for secrecy's sake, and more about the power of symbolic connection. In an age of fleeting digital interactions, there's something profoundly grounding about recognition that requires physical presence, taught not through screens but through generations of careful mentorship. The grips, signs, and passwords remain not as tools of exclusion, but as living artifacts of a brotherhood that has always believed some truths are best communicated not through words alone, but through the silent language of shared experience. Among the most striking symbols a Freemason ever receives is the white lambskin apron, a seemingly simple garment that carries the weight of centuries. Unlike the ornate robes or jeweled collars seen in some lodges, this humble piece of regalia remains universally revered. Its purity is no accident. The lambskin represents innocence, a deliberate echo of ancient sacrificial traditions where the unblemished lamb stood for sincerity and renewal. When placed upon a new initiate, it becomes his first tangible connection to the craft, a reminder that true worth isn't found in outward show, but in the integrity of one's labors. The apron's design tells its own story. Early versions were utilitarian large leather coverings meant to protect stonemasons from flying chips and rough edges as they worked. Over time, these practical shields transformed into ceremonial canvases, often embroidered with symbols like the square and compass or the all-seeing eye. The transition mirrors Freemasonry's own evolution from operative craft to philosophical pursuit. In some lodges, the apron's placement matters deeply, worn with the flap up for entered apprentices, down for fellow crafts, a silent signal of progression within the brotherhood. But the apron isn't the only piece of regalia steeped in meaning. The collar, frequently adorned with the lodge's unique jewel, signifies office and responsibility. Its shape, a broken circle at the throat, serves as a visual metaphor. The open space represents the unfinished nature of human wisdom, always room for growth. Then there's the sash, often varying in color by degree, wrapping the wearer in a tapestry of symbolic hues. Blue might denote universal brotherhood, while red could echo the fiery trials of spiritual refinement. Even gloves play a role, their whiteness reinforcing the same theme of purity as the apron, a dual reminder that clean hands and a clean heart must work in harmony. Rituals breathe life into these objects. During an initiation, the act of donning the apron becomes a sacred moment, sometimes accompanied by the words, "More ancient than the golden fleece, more honorable than the star and garter." This isn't mere theater. It's a lineage claim tying modern Masons to mythic orders of chivalry and ancient guild prestige. In some Scottish rite traditions, aprons grow increasingly elaborate with higher degrees, layered like strata of enlightenment. Yet the core message remains: no matter how ornate the regalia becomes, its purpose circles back to that initial lambskin, unadorned, unpretentious, a silent teacher. What's often overlooked is how these items function beyond the lodge. For many Masons, receiving their first apron marks a before and after moment in their personal journey. It's not uncommon to find century-old aprons carefully preserved in family archives, passed down like heirlooms. Some are even buried with their owners, a final nod to the craft's enduring bonds. The regalia's power lies in this duality. It's both intensely private and profoundly communal, a language without words that connects a medieval stonemason's workshop to a 21st century lodge room. The brilliance of Freemasonry's symbols is how they transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. A tool belt becomes a moral compass, workwear turns into a badge of honor. These objects ask a quiet question: what if the most powerful secrets aren't hidden in vaults or codes, but in the daily reminders to labor with purpose, to walk with integrity, to let one's actions, like that spotless lambskin, speak louder than any oath? Step inside a Masonic lodge, and you're not just entering a room, you're stepping into a microcosm of the universe itself, carefully designed to mirror the harmony of creation. Every element, from floor to ceiling, holds symbolic significance, transforming the space into a three-dimensional allegory. The checkerboard floor isn't just decoration. Its alternating black and white squares represent the dualities of existence, light and darkness, joy and sorrow, the eternal dance of opposites that shapes human experience. Walk across it, and you're literally tracing the path of balance, a reminder that wisdom lies in navigating life's contrasts with equanimity. Above, the ceiling often stretches into a celestial canopy, painted with stars or adorned with zodiacal symbols. This isn't mere artistry, it's a deliberate echo of the ancient concept of as above, so below. The lodge becomes a bridge between earthly and divine realms, a place where Masons align themselves with cosmic order. In some traditions, the 7 stars of the Pleiades cluster shine overhead, a nod to both navigational lore and spiritual guidance. Even the placement of lights holds meaning. 3 great pillars representing wisdom, strength, and beauty support the lodge's symbolic structure, their illumination casting shadows that teach as much as the light itself. The lodge's orientation follows sacred geometry. The east, where the sun rises, is reserved for the worshipful master's station, symbolizing enlightenment and the dawn of understanding. The west, where daylight fades, becomes the realm of the senior warden, overseeing the craftsman's labors as the sun oversees the workday. Between them lies the center, often marked by an altar bearing the volume of sacred lore, the square and compass, an axis mundi where earthly and divine intersect. This layout isn't arbitrary. It's a scaled-down version of Solomon's Temple, the biblical blueprint for sacred architecture, rebuilt not in stone but in ritual. Wall coverings reinforce the symbolism. Tracing boards painted or embroidered with emblematic scenes act as visual textbooks, their imagery encoding moral lessons. A ladder might climb toward the heavens, its rungs labeled with virtues. A broken column could signify life's fragility. Even the tools scattered in artistic disarray tell a story. The plumb line hangs as a reminder of upright living, while the level proclaims equality before the divine. Perhaps most striking is the lodge's ephemeral nature. Unlike cathedrals or temples, many lodges convene in borrowed or multipurpose spaces, assembling their sacred geometry anew for each meeting. This transience carries its own lesson. The true lodge isn't the walls but the minds of its members. The checkerboard floor may be rolled up, the celestial drapery packed away, but the symbols endure, portable as the wisdom they represent. In this way, lodge architecture becomes more than backdrop. It's an active participant in Masonic ritual. When initiates circumambulate the space, they're not just walking, they're retracing the sun's path, embodying the search for light. When officers take their stations, they're not just sitting, they're assuming roles in a cosmic drama older than the guilds themselves. Every architrave, every pillar, every carefully placed light whispers the same truth. To build a worthy life, one must first learn to see the world as a sacred construct where every stone and every soul has its appointed place. At the heart of every Masonic lodge stands a figure both respected and essential, the worshipful master. This isn't merely a title, it's a sacred responsibility, blending the roles of teacher, conductor, and guardian of tradition. Seated in the east, the symbolic place of rising light, the worshipful master governs the lodge with quiet authority, ensuring rituals unfold with precision while nurturing the growth of every brother. His station isn't just a physical seat, it's a representation of the rising sun, casting illumination on the path toward wisdom. The duties of this role are as intricate as the rituals themselves. During ceremonies, the worshipful master becomes the living embodiment of Masonic principles. With gavel in hand, he directs the lodge's energies like a maestro leading an orchestra, each tap signaling transitions between degrees, moments of reflection, or the closing of sacred space. His voice carries the weight of tradition when reciting ancient texts, yet his demeanor remains approachable, a balance between solemnity and warmth. When an initiate stands trembling before the brethren, it's the worshipful master who guides him through the symbolic darkness into light, his words weaving allegory into lived experience. Beyond ritual oversight, the role demands profound mentorship. A skilled, worshipful master doesn't just recite lines, he reads the unspoken needs of his lodge. He might notice a fellow craft struggling with a symbol's meaning and offer private guidance, or temper a heated debate with reminders of brotherly love. His leadership extends to the lodge's very soul, preserving harmony, resolving disputes with Solomon-like judgment, and ensuring the fraternity's teachings resonate beyond formal meetings. The path to this position reflects Masonry's emphasis on earned wisdom. Typically, a brother ascends through progressive offices: junior warden, senior warden mastering each station's lessons before assuming the master's chair. This gradual progression ensures he understands the lodge's rhythms intimately, from the symbolism of the West where the senior warden oversees labor to the North's place of rest. By the time he assumes the East, his knowledge isn't theoretical, it's etched into his actions. Historically, the worshipful master's role echoes medieval guild traditions, where master craftsmen trained apprentices with equal parts discipline and care. Figures like Elias Ashmole, the 17th century antiquarian and early Masonic leader, exemplified this blend of intellectual depth and fraternal devotion. Today, the title still carries echoes of its operative roots, those master builders who didn't just command but inspired. What makes this role extraordinary isn't its authority, but its humility. The worshipful master wears no crown. His regalia, though distinguished, remains secondary to his service. His true tools are patience, insight, and an unwavering commitment to the craft's ideals. When he raises the gavel, it's not to impose but to unite. When he speaks, it's not to lecture but to illuminate. In a world obsessed with fleeting power, the worshipful master stands as a quiet counterpoint, a reminder that the most enduring leadership isn't about ruling from above, but lighting the way from within. The lodge may change, members may come and go, but the essence of this role remains, to keep the flame of tradition burning brightly, not as a relic, but as a living torch passed from one guardian to the next. In the worshipful master's hands, centuries of ritual breathe anew, transforming ancient symbols into personal transformation for every brother who crosses the checkered floor. Freemasonry's relationship with women is a tapestry woven with threads of tradition, exclusion, and gradual evolution. For centuries, the fraternity's doors remained firmly closed to women, rooted in its origins as a male-only guild of stonemasons. The ancient charters explicitly limited membership to freeborn men, a rule that became sacrosanct in mainstream lodges. Yet this prohibition birthed fascinating alternatives, parallel organizations where women could participate in Masonic traditions without breaching the Brotherhood's core boundaries. The most prominent of these is the Order of the Eastern Star, established in the 1800s as a Masonic-adjacent body where wives, daughters, and female relatives of Masons could engage in symbolic rituals. Unlike traditional lodges, Eastern Star meetings revolve around biblical heroines like Ruth and Esther, their virtues encoded in a pentagram-shaped emblem. But the story doesn't end there. By the late 19th century, a more radical movement emerged, co-Masonry, pioneered by figures like Marie de Raismes, a French feminist initiated in 1882. These lodges dared to challenge centuries of tradition by admitting women as full members. The reaction from mainstream Freemasonry was swift and severe. Recognition was withdrawn, and co-Masonic lodges were declared irregular. Yet they persisted, crafting their own rituals that mirrored traditional Masonic degrees while adapting language to reflect equality. Today, organizations like Le Droit Humain operate worldwide, their lodges filled with men and women studying the same symbols side by side. The divide between these approaches reveals deeper philosophical tensions. Traditionalists argue that Freemasonry's power lies in its single-gender dynamics, where male bonding fosters unique spiritual growth. They point to historical precedent and the fraternity's right to self-determination. Progressives counter that exclusion contradicts Masonry's professed ideals of enlightenment and universal brotherhood. Interesting compromises have emerged. Some grand lodges now charter parallel women's lodges with nearly identical rituals while maintaining nominal separation. Contemporary debates often center on language, where traditional oaths reference brotherhood. Co-Masonic rites might say siblinghood. The apron's symbolism remains, but its presentation adapts to reflect shared human virtues rather than gendered archetypes. Even architecture evolves. Some mixed lodges reinterpret the pillars, bows, and jachin as complementary forces rather than masculine symbols. What makes this tension so compelling is how it mirrors society's broader struggles with tradition versus progress. Freemasonry, often a microcosm of cultural shifts, finds itself grappling with questions about identity, legacy, and relevance. The Eastern Star's elaborate regalia and co-Masonry's adapted rituals both represent attempts to honor Masonic wisdom while expanding its reach. Perhaps the most telling development is occurring quietly in lodges worldwide as younger Masons rise through the ranks. Many bring more inclusive perspectives, ensuring this conversation is far from over. At its heart, this isn't just about membership policies, it's about how ancient institutions navigate change. Whether through auxiliary orders or integrated lodges, women are now undeniably part of Freemasonry's living history, not as spectators, but as active participants shaping its future. The craft that once built physical cathedrals now faces a different construction project, building bridges between tradition and transformation, one symbolic stone at a time. The 18th century wasn't just an era of powdered wigs and revolutions. It was the crucible where Freemasonry and Enlightenment thought fused into something extraordinary. Picture the smoke-filled coffeehouses of Paris and London, where philosophers and craftsmen alike debated ideas that would reshape the world. Freemasonry didn't just coexist with the Enlightenment, it became one of its most potent vehicles, spreading ideals of reason, tolerance, and human progress through its network of lodges. At a time when Europe was fractured by religious wars and absolutist monarchies, Masonic halls offered something radical, a space where men of different faiths and social ranks could meet as equals, bound not by dogma but by shared pursuit of truth. Central to this convergence was the fraternity's embrace of secular morality. Unlike rigid church doctrines, Masonic teachings framed virtue as universal, accessible through reason rather than revelation. The lodge's symbolic tools, the square for fairness, the compass for boundaries, became metaphors for an ethical life grounded in humanism rather than divine decree. This resonated deeply with Enlightenment luminaries. Voltaire, that sharp-tongued critic of superstition, was initiated into a Parisian lodge in 1778, seeing in Freemasonry a reflection of his own battles against intolerance. Across the Atlantic, Benjamin Franklin wasn't just a founding father but a fervent Mason, printing the fraternity's constitutions and weaving its ideals into the fabric of American democracy. For these figures, Freemasonry wasn't a retreat from the world but a workshop for building a better one. The connection ran deeper than shared membership. Masonic rituals, with their emphasis on light, knowledge, and self-improvement, mirrored the Enlightenment's core narrative, humanity emerging from darkness through education. The lodge's structure itself was a microcosm of Enlightenment values. Debates followed strict rules of order, promoting civil discourse. Hierarchies were based on merit, not birthright. Even the architectural symbolism spoke to the age's obsession with universal harmony. The compass and square echoed Newton's precise universe, governed by discernible laws. Yet tensions simmered beneath this alliance. The Catholic Church condemned Freemasonry as a hotbed of heresy, while some Enlightenment radicals dismissed its rituals as archaic mumbo-jumbo. Even within lodges, divides emerged between those who saw Masonry as a philosophical tool and others clinging to esoteric traditions. The Bavarian Illuminati, founded by ex-Mason Adam Weishaupt, tried to strip away the mysticism entirely, repurposing lodge networks for outright political reform. Their dramatic suppression only heightened suspicions that Masonic halls were incubators of rebellion. What's often overlooked is how Freemasonry tempered the Enlightenment's more extreme impulses. While philosophers like Diderot dreamed of overturning all tradition, Masonic teachings balanced reason with reverence for ancient wisdom. The lodge became a middle ground, a place where Newton's optics could coexist with alchemical symbols, where progress didn't require obliterating the past. This nuanced approach left fingerprints everywhere, in the U.S. Constitution's checks and balances, in the tolerant deism of figures like Goethe, another Mason, even in the design of cities like Washington, D.C., where Masonic symbols encoded Enlightenment ideals in stone and street grids. The legacy endures. Modern debates about civil society, pluralism, and the role of reason still carry echoes of those 18th century lodge discussions. Freemasonry's genius was recognizing that enlightenment isn't a solitary epiphany, but a collective project built not just with books and lectures, but with handshakes, rituals, and the quiet work of shaping character. In an age that often reduces ideas to tweets, there's something profoundly resonant about a tradition that still measures wisdom the old-fashioned way, one carefully placed stone at a time. The whispers start small, a suggestion that influential men in dark suits might be pulling the strings behind thrones and stock exchanges. Few organizations have inspired as many conspiracy theories as the Freemasons, accused over centuries of everything from orchestrating revolutions to worshipping the devil. These claims tap into something primal, the fear that shadowy elites manipulate world events beyond public scrutiny. But where did these ideas originate, and why does Freemasonry in particular attract such fervent suspicion? The seeds were planted early. When Freemasonry spread across 18th century Europe, its secretive nature and elite membership made it an easy target. The Catholic Church's papal bull in 1738 condemned Masonic oaths as sinister, fueling suspicions that lodges were dens of heresy. By the 1790s, the French Revolution's chaos led many to blame the Masons, never mind that most revolutionary leaders weren't members. The myth persisted because it offered a tidy explanation for complex upheavals. Chaos wasn't random but engineered by clandestine puppet masters. America had its own defining panic, the Morgan Affair of 1826. William Morgan, a disgruntled ex-Mason in upstate New York, threatened to publish an exposé revealing the fraternity's rituals. His sudden disappearance, likely a crude abduction by local Masons, ignited a firestorm. Newspapers screamed of murder, anti-Masonic political parties formed, and lodges emptied overnight. Though Morgan's fate remains unknown, the scandal crystallized a narrative of Masonic impunity that still echoes in conspiracy lore today. The 20th century amplified these fears. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, that infamous anti-Semitic forgery, bizarrely wove Freemasons into its fantasy of global domination. Fascist regimes from Nazi Germany to Franco's Spain banned lodges, painting them as liberal cabals. Even today, online forums obsess over Masonic symbols on currency or in government buildings as proof of covert control. The irony is thick. While conspiracists imagine a unified Masonic agenda, historians note the fraternity has always been decentralized, with members often on opposing sides of conflicts. What makes these theories so durable? Partly, it's the allure of patterns. The human brain can't resist connecting dots even where none exist. A handshake here, a pyramid on a dollar bill there, and suddenly a grand design emerges. Freemasonry's actual history, full of civic-minded members and charitable work, gets overshadowed by sensational myths. Yet these accusations reveal less about the Masons than about society's anxieties. When people feel powerless, it's comforting to believe someone, however shadowy, is in control. The truth is far messier. Freemasonry isn't a monolith, but a mosaic of individuals whose shared rituals inspire fellowship, not world domination. The real secret: most conspiracy theories crumble under scrutiny, but the fascination with hidden power never fades. When the first shots of the American Revolution rang out in Lexington and Concord, the men who rallied to the cause weren't just patriots, they were brothers. Literally, Freemasonry's influence on the revolution runs deeper than many realize, woven into the very fabric of the struggle for independence. At the heart of this connection stood George Washington himself, who was initiated into the Fredericksburg Lodge at just 20 years old. His Masonic apron, a gift from the Marquis de Lafayette, wasn't mere regalia. It symbolized the shared values that bonded revolutionaries across colonies and even oceans. Washington wasn't alone. Benjamin Franklin served as Grand Master of Pennsylvania's Lodge. Paul Revere organized Patriot Couriers through his Boston Lodge, and John Hancock's signature flourishes beneath the Declaration of Independence mirrored the bold strokes of a Masonic master's pen. But how did these fraternal bonds shape history? Lodge meetings became revolutionary incubators. In smoke-filled tavern rooms under the guise of ritual, men from different colonies could strategize freely. The Masonic emphasis on liberty, equality, and enlightened governance provided philosophical fuel for rebellion. When Revere made his famous midnight ride, he wasn't just a lone horseman. He was tapping into a pre-existing communication network of lodge brothers who could relay messages swiftly and secretly. Masonic passwords, typically used for fraternal recognition, doubled as countersigns between rebel cells. The Boston Tea Party itself unfolded with Masonic precision. Participants reportedly used lodge signals to coordinate under the noses of British troops. Perhaps most fascinating was how Masonic symbolism infused the revolution's very identity. The eye and pyramid motif, later adopted for the Great Seal of the United States, first appeared in Masonic iconography, representing divine providence watching over a work in progress, an apt metaphor for a nascent nation. The Revolution's military structure mirrored lodge hierarchies too. At Valley Forge, when Washington needed to maintain morale during that brutal winter, he turned to fellow Masons like Baron von Steuben to implement the disciplined training that saved the Continental Army. Even the way revolutionary leaders framed their cause as an enlightened struggle against tyranny echoed Masonic teachings about moral governance. Yet this relationship wasn't without its ironies. While Freemasonry preached universal brotherhood, British and American Masons found themselves on opposing battle lines. There are accounts of battlefield encounters where enemies recognized each other's Masonic signals, leading to unexpected acts of mercy. The fraternity's transnational nature created strange alliances. French Masonic lodges, inspired by Enlightenment ideals, became critical fundraising hubs for the American cause, while some British officers hesitated to target known Masonic meeting places. The Revolution's success cemented Freemasonry's place in the new nation's identity. When Washington laid the U.S. Capitol's cornerstone in 1793, he did so in full Masonic regalia, using the fraternity's ceremonial tools. The event wasn't just symbolic, it represented how deeply these two revolutions, political and philosophical, were intertwined. The lodges had done more than shelter conspirators. They'd provided a blueprint for how to construct a society from the ground up, one virtuous citizen at a time. What's often overlooked is how revolutionary this really was. In an era of rigid class structures, Masonic lodges had given colonial farmers the chance to debate politics with merchants and lawyers as equals. The Revolution's famous slogan, "No taxation without representation," found early traction in lodges where men already practiced representative governance through elected lodge offices. The fraternity's rituals, focused on self-improvement and moral accountability, shaped leaders who saw nation-building as the ultimate act of craftsmanship. To walk through early American history is to see Masonic fingerprints everywhere, from the compass and square subtly worked into early currency to the way revolutionary correspondence mimicked lodge protocols. But perhaps the most telling legacy is this: when those founding fathers envisioned a more perfect union, they didn't just draft documents, they built rituals, knowing that enduring revolutions require not just laws but shared symbols that speak to the soul. Beyond the three foundational degrees of craft masonry lies a hidden labyrinth of wisdom, the Scottish Rite, where initiates ascend through an astonishing 29 additional degrees, each a gateway to deeper philosophical truths. Imagine stepping into a world where Masonic symbolism transforms into high drama, with rituals so elaborate they rival theatrical productions. Unlike the universal first 3 degrees practiced worldwide, these higher degrees aren't mandatory. They're an optional journey for those craving deeper exploration. The Scottish Rites degrees unfold like chapters in an ancient manuscript divided into 4 sections. The Lodge of Perfection degrees 4 through 14, the Chapter of Rose Coeur 15 through 18, the Council of Kadosh 19 through 30, and the Consistory 31 and 32. Each stage peels back another layer of allegory, from the moral lessons of the 4th degree, often called Secret Master, to the metaphysical revelations of the 32nd, where candidates confront the nature of justice, truth, and human imperfection. The rituals themselves are breathtaking in scope. Some reenact medieval trials, putting candidates in the role of Knights Templar defending sacred principles. Others borrow from Renaissance Hermeticism, using alchemical symbolism to represent personal transformation. In the 18th degree, known as the Knight of the Rose Coeur, members explore themes of resurrection and renewal through a haunting ceremony set against the backdrop of the Crusades. The 32nd degree's ritual, often held in grand cathedral-like temples, culminates in a powerful meditation on mortality and legacy. What makes these degrees remarkable isn't just their pageantry, but how they expand Masonry's core teachings. Where craft masonry uses stonemason tools as metaphors, the Scottish Rite draws from history's greatest minds, Philo of Alexandria, medieval Kabbalists, even the Enlightenment's philosophers, to probe life's deepest questions. Yet the Scottish Rite isn't alone in offering higher degrees. The York Rite presents a compelling alternative, its 10 additional degrees steeped in the lore of medieval chivalry and biblical knighthood. Here, candidates don't just study symbols, they become characters in an ongoing saga. The Royal Arch degree reveals a lost vault beneath King Solomon's temple, said to contain sacred wisdom. The Knights Templar degrees, open only to Christian Masons, immerse members in the military monastic traditions of the historical Templars, complete with sword rituals and Crusader imagery. While the Scottish Rite leans into philosophy, the York Rite thrives on historical romance, its ceremonies evoking the clash of steel and whispered prayers in candlelit chapels. The differences between these branches reveal Masonry's adaptability. The Scottish Rite, with its French Enlightenment influences, appeals to those drawn to abstract contemplation. The York Rite, rooted in English and American traditions, attracts history enthusiasts who find spiritual meaning in knightly virtues. Both, however, share a common thread. They transform Masonry from a fraternity into a lifelong quest. What few outsiders grasp is how these degrees function in practice. They're not ranks to boast about, but lessons to live by. A 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason isn't higher than a 3rd degree Master Mason. He's simply pursued a different curriculum. The real value lies in their cumulative effect. Like concentric circles rippling outward, each degree adds nuance to Masonry's central tenets. By the time a member completes the journey, he hasn't just memorized rituals, he's experienced a symbolic odyssey spanning centuries of esoteric thought. The brilliance of this system is its flexibility. A Mason might resonate with the Scottish Rite's mystical overtones or the York Rite's historical pageantry, or choose neither, finding fulfillment in craft Masonry's simplicity. What matters isn't the path taken, but the shared conviction that wisdom grows when pursued collectively. These degrees stand as testament to Freemasonry's enduring power, a tradition old enough to honor ancient mysteries, yet dynamic enough to let every seeker find his own way through them. Among the most visible faces of Masonic philanthropy are the Shriners, those gregarious men in crimson fezzes who seem to appear at every parade, waving from tiny cars or tossing candy to delighted crowds. But behind the playful antics lies one of North America's most impactful charitable endeavors, the Shriners Hospitals for Children Network. This paradox captures something essential about Freemasonry's relationship with public service, an organization steeped in secrecy that simultaneously operates some of the most transparently benevolent institutions in modern medicine. The origins of this unique blend trace back to 1870, when a group of New York Masons founded the ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. Initially conceived as a light-hearted fraternity within Freemasonry, the Shriners adopted Middle Eastern-themed regalia and pageantry purely for theatrical flair. Their iconic fezzes weren't meant to signify any authentic connection to Islam, but rather to inject whimsy into Masonic social gatherings. Yet by the early 20th century, the Shriners pivoted dramatically from hosting circuses to addressing a dire societal need: pediatric care for polio and orthopedic conditions. The first Shriners Hospital opened in Shreveport in 1922, offering treatment regardless of a family's ability to pay, a radical concept in pre-Medicaid America. Today, 22 Shriners hospitals span 3 countries, specializing in burn care, spinal injuries, and cleft palates. The statistics astonish: over 1.5 million children treated, billions invested in research, and countless lives transformed through pioneering techniques like 3D printed prosthetic limbs. What makes this system extraordinary isn't just its scale, but its philosophy. Unlike many charity hospitals that focus solely on acute care, Shriners' facilities emphasize long-term rehabilitation, physically rebuilding young lives while preserving dignity. Walk through their colorful corridors, and you'll find aquatic therapy pools designed like pirate ships, therapy gardens where wheelchair-bound patients grow flowers, and playrooms where children awaiting surgery forget their fears amid laughter. The duality between secrecy and service reveals itself in fascinating ways. While traditional Masonic lodges guard their rituals closely, Shriners plaster their hospitals' walls with donor recognition plaques, including the names of local lodges whose members raised funds through pancake breakfasts and golf tournaments. Initiation rites might remain confidential, but hospital tours are enthusiastically public. Even the Shriners' signature events like their circus fundraisers serve a dual purpose: entertaining communities while demystifying Masonic-affiliated groups through approachable fun. This balancing act hasn't been without challenges. Some critics argue the Shriners' flamboyant image overshadows their serious mission, while others question why an organization requiring members to first attain the 3rd degree in Freemasonry doesn't direct more resources toward public Masonic education. Yet the results speak for themselves. When a Shriners hospital pioneered the use of fish skin to treat severe burns, a groundbreaking technique developed in partnership with Brazilian researchers, it wasn't a victory for any secret society but for humanity. Perhaps the Shriners' greatest lesson lies in their evolution. What began as a Masonic social club transformed into a health-care revolution because its members recognized a simple truth: the highest form of brotherhood isn't just about bonding behind closed doors, but about opening doors for others. Their journey mirrors Freemasonry's broader charitable ethos, from the quiet benevolence of local lodge food drives to the global impact of the Masonic Foundation. The red fez, initially just a costume piece, became a beacon of hope visible in every community parade and hospital hallway. In this way, the Shriners embody a profound Masonic principle made manifest: that true enlightenment isn't measured by the mysteries one guards, but by the suffering one alleviates. Their hospitals stand as living temples, not of stone and symbol, but of healing and hope, where the ultimate secret revealed isn't some esoteric truth, but the transformative power of compassion in action. The Masonic funeral service carries a weight and reverence unlike any other lodge ceremony, a final tribute where symbolism speaks louder than words. As brethren gather around the coffin, the air thick with both grief and solemn purpose, every gesture becomes a testament to bonds that transcend mortal life. The ritual begins with the draping of the coffin in the Masonic apron, that same lambskin garment the departed brother first received as an initiate. This act forms a poignant circle. The apron that marked his entrance into the fraternity now accompanies his exit, a tangible reminder that Masonic ties endure beyond the grave. Central to the ceremony is the placing of evergreen sprigs upon the coffin, a tradition steeped in ancient botanical symbolism. Unlike flowers that wither, these resilient greens represent the soul's immortality, echoing beliefs as old as the Eleusinian mysteries. Each branch is carefully positioned by lodge officers, their movements deliberate as they form a living triangle over the departed. The evergreen's fragrance mingles with the scent of polished wood, creating a sensory allegory. Though the body returns to earth, the essence remains vibrant as pine needles in winter. The funeral's most stirring moment comes with the broken column rite. A white marble pillar, its capital sheared off mid-shaft, is placed near the coffin, a visual metaphor for a life interrupted, its work unfinished. This symbol, often seen on Masonic tombstones since the 18th century, whispers a profound truth. While individual lives end, the lodge's collective labor continues. As the worshipful master drops 3 measures of corn, wine, and oil onto the coffin, echoing the biblical consecration of King Solomon's temple, the substances symbolize nourishment, refreshment, and joy, gifts offered for the brother's journey beyond the veil. Uniformity gives these rites their power. Whether conducted for a Grand Master or a humble lodge member, the service remains essentially unchanged, reinforcing Masonry's egalitarian ideals. The same words spoken at George Washington's funeral in 1799, drawing from the Book of Ruth's, "Whither thou goest, I will go," may grace a modern carpenter's farewell. This continuity creates a bridge across centuries, allowing contemporary Masons to stand shoulder to shoulder with their predecessors in shared ritual. Perhaps most revealing is what happens after the formal ceremony concludes. Brethren often form a circle around the grave, each tossing in a single white glove, a final gesture recalling the purity of intention they pledged at initiation. The glove's descent mirrors the letting go of earthly ties, while the encircling brothers embody the fraternity's unbroken chain. Even in death, Masonry teaches, no member walks alone. The living become stewards of memory, ensuring that a brother's legacy, like the evergreen, remains ever vital. These rituals don't deny mortality, they transfigure it. Through symbols that have weathered empires and upheavals, Freemasons affirm a quiet conviction that honorable labor, whether with stone or character, leaves indelible marks. The funeral rites aren't merely about mourning loss, but about illuminating what endures: the evergreen soul, the unbroken circle, the work that outlives the worker. In a world that often shies from death's reality, Masonry meets it with clear-eyed reverence, turning final farewells into lasting lessons about how we might all live and die with purpose. From the shadowy conspirators in Hollywood thrillers to the cryptic symbols adorning album covers, Freemasonry has become pop culture's favorite secret society, a canvas onto which filmmakers, authors, and musicians project both fascination and fantasy. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code might be the most famous example, weaving Masonic lore into a global phenomenon, but the fraternity's fingerprints appear everywhere, often stripped of historical nuance for dramatic effect. Brown's portrayal of the Priory of Sion and hidden Templar legacies borrowed heavily from Masonic imagery, blending fact with feverish speculation. The book's runaway success cemented a modern mythos where Freemasons guard earth-shattering secrets, a trope that echoes through countless imitators, from National Treasure's treasure hunting romps to the labyrinthine plots of TV's The Lost Symbol. Yet cinema's relationship with Freemasonry is older than most realize. Silent film pioneer and Mason Buster Keaton slyly worked lodge symbolism into his 1924 comedy, Sherlock Jr., where a dream sequence unfolds on a Masonic tracing board. Decades later, Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut plunged audiences into a world of occult-like rituals, borrowing liberally, if inaccurately, from Masonic ceremony to heighten the film's eerie atmosphere. The truth is, Hollywood rarely lets authenticity interfere with a good story. Real Masonic rituals emphasize moral allegory, not the cloak and dagger intrigue that sells tickets. Music channels its own Masonic mystique. British heavy metal legends Iron Maiden and Motorhead flaunted pyramid and eye imagery, tapping into the fraternity's aura of rebellion and esoteric knowledge. Even hip-hop artists like Jay-Z have incorporated Masonic hand signs into performances, though these gestures often owe more to street culture than actual lodge practice. The irony is rich. A fraternity founded on discretion finds itself endlessly reinterpreted by creators who prize spectacle over substance. Literature offers more nuanced portraits. Rudyard Kipling, a devoted Mason, wove lodge themes into stories like The Man Who Would Be King, where two adventurers misuse Masonic recognition signals with tragic consequences. Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer features a scene where Tom stumbles upon a Masonic funeral, a rare instance of accurate representation in 19th century fiction. These works hint at a deeper truth. When artists engage with Masonry beyond the clichés, they uncover its human core, the bonds of friendship, the wrestling with mortality, the search for meaning. Video games like Assassin's Creed take interactive liberties, casting Templars and Masons as eternal adversaries in a shadow war. While thrilling gameplay trumps historical accuracy, these narratives demonstrate how Masonic symbolism thrives in digital spaces, evolving for new generations. Even superhero lore gets involved. Batman's secretive League of Shadows owes a debt to Masonic-inspired secret society tropes. The cumulative effect of these portrayals is a double-edged sword. Pop culture spreads awareness of Freemasonry, but often at the cost of distortion. Where real lodges preach tolerance, films depict cabals. Where rituals teach self-improvement, novels invent elaborate heists. Yet this very misrepresentation speaks to something profound: the enduring power of mystery in an age of transparency. Whether feared or revered, the Masonic image endures because it taps into universal cravings, the desire for belonging, the thrill of the unsolved, the sense that beneath life's surface, deeper patterns wait to be uncovered. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in what pop culture ignores. Few blockbusters explore Masonry's charitable hospitals or its role in fostering civil discourse, unsexy truths overshadowed by mythic conspiracies. The next time you spot a pyramid on a dollar bill in a thriller or hear a rock anthem reference the craft, remember, the real Freemasonry isn't hiding world-altering secrets. Its true lesson might be simpler but no less radical, that in an age of division, men can still gather not as rivals but as brothers, building something greater than themselves. In the hushed glow of a 21st century Masonic lodge, an unexpected sound breaks the ancient silence, the soft chime of a smartphone notification. This tiny intrusion into centuries-old rituals captures the central tension facing modern Freemasonry: how to honor traditions forged in candlelit chambers while navigating an era of digital immediacy. Some lodges have embraced technology wholeheartedly, projecting ritual diagrams onto screens or using tablets to display sacred texts. Others draw the line firmly, insisting that the tactile experience of handling worn ritual books and hand-drawn tracing boards is irreplaceable. The debate reveals deeper questions about what constitutes authenticity in an organization that traces its roots to medieval stonemasons yet operates in the age of artificial intelligence. Traditionalists argue that the physicality of Masonic practice, the weight of the gavel, the texture of the apron, the flicker of candlelight on symbolic imagery creates an irreplicable atmosphere for contemplation. They point to psychological studies showing that tactile engagement enhances memory and emotional connection, suggesting that digitizing rituals might dilute their transformative power. At a lodge in York, England, members still practice the floorwork method, literally walking the geometric patterns of their symbols on an inlaid lodge floor, believing the embodied experience connects them directly to their 14th century predecessors. Progressive voices counter that adaptation has always been Freemasonry's survival mechanism. They note that 18th century lodges adopted printing presses to standardize rituals, just as today's lodges might use video conferencing to include infirm or distant members. During the pandemic, some jurisdictions temporarily permitted virtual degree conferrals, a radical departure that sparked both outrage and gratitude. The Grand Lodge of California now offers augmented reality apps to help candidates visualize complex symbols, framing technology not as a replacement for tradition but as a new kind of Masonic tool, the digital equivalent of the square and compass. Beyond technology, contemporary lodges grapple with ritual language itself. Some European jurisdictions have updated archaic phrasing, he becoming they, in mixed-gender co-Masonic lodges, while American traditionalists preserve the original wording as sacred. Even small changes ripple through generations. When a London lodge experimented with replacing the biblical oath with a humanist alternative, it unintentionally barred members from visiting more conservative lodges where traditional obligations remain mandatory. The most fascinating adaptations occur where ancient symbols intersect with modern concerns. An Australian lodge composed largely of healthcare workers reinterpreted the rough and perfect ashlars traditionally representing moral improvement as metaphors for personal growth through service during crises. Another in Norway incorporated climate change themes into their lectures on architectural symbolism, framing ecological stewardship as a Masonic duty. These innovations follow Freemasonry's oldest pattern, taking timeless principles and applying them to contemporary struggles. What emerges isn't a simple divide between progress and preservation, but a living dialogue about how wisdom transmits across centuries. The lodges thriving today often strike a delicate balance, projecting rituals onto screens while keeping handcrafted aprons, streaming lectures to global audiences but reserving certain rites for in-person participation. Like the winding staircase in their own symbolism, modern Freemasonry ascends by circling back to its core purpose, not to worship the past but to build bridges between what was, what is, and what might be. The true test may lie not in whether they use candles or LEDs, but in whether their adaptations still ignite that same spark of transformation in seekers' hearts. The story of Freemasonry in the 21st century reads like a tale of two brotherhoods, one fading in its traditional strongholds, the other blooming unexpectedly in new soil. Walk into a lodge in London or Philadelphia today, and you're likely to find rows of empty chairs where generations of members once sat. Membership in Western countries has plummeted by nearly 70% since the 1950s, a decline mirrored in fraternal organizations worldwide. The causes are both universal and uniquely Masonic. Aging demographics play a role. The average American Mason is now 65 years old, but so does modern society's erosion of secret society's mystique. Younger generations, raised on social media's instant transparency, often struggle to connect with an institution built on gradual initiation and guarded traditions. The very secrecy that once attracted intellectuals and seekers now fuels suspicion in an era craving openness. Even the time commitment proves daunting. Weekly lodge meetings compete with soccer practices and Netflix binges in a way they didn't when factories blew whistles at 5 p.m. Yet halfway across the globe, an entirely different narrative unfolds. Lagos, Nigeria boasts one of the world's most vibrant Masonic scenes, with lodges often overflowing with members under 40. The Grand Lodge of the Philippines initiates hundreds annually, while Indonesia's Masonic community, once suppressed under Suharto's regime, now thrives with university professors and tech entrepreneurs. Africa's Masonic growth is particularly striking. In countries like Ghana and Senegal, lodges serve as rare neutral spaces where tribal and religious divisions dissolve under shared ideals. The reasons for this divergence are as complex as the cultures themselves. In post-colonial nations, Freemasonry's emphasis on merit over inherited status resonates powerfully. Its structured self-improvement appeals to upwardly mobile professionals, while the fraternity's Western origins lend it an aspirational sheen absent in Europe or America. Even the secrecy reads differently in societies where political speech remains risky. Masonic discretion feels less like elitism and more like prudent community building. Western lodges aren't going quietly, however. Faced with dwindling ranks, many have launched bold reinventions. Some host open houses with beer tastings and live music, far cries from the hushed solemnity of traditional meetings. The Grand Lodge of New York streams educational lectures on YouTube, while Dutch Masons partner with history museums to contextualize their symbols. Most radical are lodges experimenting with lightning initiations, condensed versions of the normally months-long process to accommodate busy schedules. Not all innovations succeed. A London lodge's attempt at a Masonic dating night famously flopped when attendees expected actual matchmaking rather than philosophical discussion. The deeper challenge lies in balancing accessibility with authenticity. When a lodge in Toronto replaced its oak-paneled meeting room with a minimalist event space to attract millennials, longtime members complained the sterile environment drained rituals of their gravitas. Conversely, overly rigid adherence to tradition can backfire, as when a candidate in Austin walked out after being handed a 19th-century oath book containing racial exclusion clauses left unaltered for historical accuracy. The most successful adaptations thread this needle carefully. A Seattle lodge revamped its outreach by reframing Freemasonry not as a secret society, but as a society with secrets, a subtle but crucial distinction emphasizing transparency about its existence while preserving the sacred intimacy of its inner teachings. What emerges is a quiet revolution in how Freemasonry defines relevance. In Kenya, lodges partner with NGOs to build schools, making community service the face of their activities. Scandinavian Masons host public lectures on Enlightenment philosophy, positioning themselves as custodians of intellectual heritage rather than shadowy operators. Even sartorial changes speak volumes. Younger members in Buenos Aires might wear discreet Masonic lapel pins instead of full regalia, signaling affiliation without theatricality. The fraternity that once shaped nations from behind closed doors now wrestles with a paradoxical truth. To survive, it must both cherish its mysteries and prove their enduring value in daylight. This global divide decline in some quarters, renaissance in others holds up a mirror to broader cultural shifts. The West's crisis of community and trust finds stark contrast in developing nations' hunger for structures offering both brotherhood and upward mobility. Yet both scenarios share a common thread: the human need for meaning-making rituals. Whether in a Nairobi high-rise or a Detroit storefront lodge, the core appeal remains, not the secrets themselves, but the transformative journey of uncovering them together. The real test may not be whether Freemasonry adapts its rituals, but whether it can remind a fractured world why such rituals mattered in the first place. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart wasn't just a musical genius, he was a devoted Freemason whose compositions echo with the fraternity's symbolism. Initiated in Vienna's Woltaire Lodge in 1784, Mozart poured Masonic ideals into his work, most famously in The Magic Flute. The opera brims with Masonic imagery, trials by fire and water, the symbolic number 3 woven into musical phrases, and the archetypal journey from darkness to enlightenment. His lesser-known Masonic funeral music remains one of the most profound musical expressions of the fraternity's meditation on mortality. Yet, contrary to conspiracy theories, Mozart's untimely death wasn't punishment for revealing secrets. His Masonic brothers organized his funeral and later supported his impoverished family, demonstrating the fraternity's ethos of brotherly love in action. Winston Churchill's Masonic journey reveals how the craft shaped leaders during history's defining moments. Initiated in 1901 at London's Studholme Lodge, the young statesman embraced Masonry's emphasis on disciplined self-improvement qualities that would later steel him during Britain's darkest hours. While Churchill's active participation waned as wartime responsibilities mounted, contemporaries noted how his speeches echoed Masonic principles of resilience and service. The myth that he used Masonic connections to secure Allied victory is exaggerated, but his affiliation highlights how lodge membership provided networking opportunities for ambitious young men in Edwardian England. When Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the lunar surface in 1969, he carried more than the American flag. A tiny silk Masonic banner traveled with him, a gift from his lodge in Texas. As one of several astronaut Masons, Aldrin saw space exploration as an extension of Masonry's quest for enlightenment. The famous photo of him taking communion on the moon reflects this synthesis of scientific ambition and spiritual reverence. Contrary to wild theories, NASA had no Masonic agenda, but the fraternity's influence on early aviation and rocketry was real. Figures like John Glenn's mentor, Masonic engineer William Macready, helped build the foundations of spaceflight. Benjamin Franklin's Masonic career demonstrates the fraternity's role in shaping revolutionary thought. As Grand Master of Pennsylvania's Lodge, Franklin didn't just print Masonic constitutions, he embodied their ideals through scientific inquiry and diplomatic bridge building. His experiments with electricity mirrored Masonic themes of bringing light to darkness, while his famed Albany Plan of Union used lodge governance as a model for colonial cooperation. The myth that Franklin smuggled Templar treasures to America is pure fantasy, but his real legacy, forging unity through shared principles, proves far more revolutionary. Each of these men interacted with Freemasonry differently: Mozart as spiritual seeker, Churchill as young aspirant, Aldrin as explorer symbolist, Franklin as institution builder. Their stories dissolve the caricature of Masonic membership as either sinister conspiracy or mere social club, revealing instead how the craft served as a crucible for talent, a framework for ethical leadership, and occasionally a canvas for extraordinary creativity. The lodges didn't make these men great, but for each, the fraternity provided tools to hone their greatness, proving that sometimes history's most enduring secrets aren't about hidden power, but about how ordinary people forge extraordinary legacies. The relationship between the Catholic Church and Freemasonry reads like a centuries-long feud, marked by papal condemnations, secret persecutions, and deep theological mistrust. In 1738, Pope Clement XII issued the first major salvo with his bull, In Eminenti, declaring automatic excommunication for any Catholic who joined Masonic lodges. The reasons were both political and doctrinal. Freemasonry's secrecy clashed with church authority. Its interfaith membership undermined Catholic exclusivity, and rumors swirled that lodges promoted natural religion over revealed truth. Subsequent popes doubled down. Benedict XIV's Providers in 1751 condemned Masonic oaths as sinful, while Leo XIII's 1884 encyclical Humanum Genus framed the conflict in apocalyptic terms, portraying Freemasonry as a rival pseudo-church spreading the kingdom of Satan upon earth. Behind the theological warnings lay very real power struggles. In 19th-century Europe, Masonic lodges often served as liberal counterweights to Catholic monarchies, backing Italian unification against the Papal States and supporting anti-clerical laws in France. When Mexican President Benito Juárez, a Mason, seized church lands in the 1850s, or when Portuguese lodges helped overthrow the Catholic monarchy in 1910, Vatican officials saw proof of a global anti-Catholic conspiracy. The Church's opposition wasn't purely defensive. It reflected genuine alarm at Freemasonry's ability to unite Protestants, Jews, and freethinkers across social classes, a dangerous pluralism in an era when the Vatican still saw itself as Christendom's sole legitimate arbiter. The 20th century brought paradoxical shifts. While the 1983 Code of Canon Law softened language, removing explicit mention of Freemasonry, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, clarified in 1983 that membership remained grave sin. This tension persists today. Pope Francis reaffirmed the ban in 2021, yet some bishops quietly tolerate Catholic Masons, especially in Anglo-American countries where lodges downplay anti-clericalism. The rise of ecumenism complicates matters further. How can the Church dialogue with Muslims and Protestants while shunning Masons who share similar moral teachings? Recent years have seen glimmers of détente. In Germany and Austria, some dioceses now distinguish between regular Freemasonry, deemed acceptable if lodges are just rituals, and irregular branches still condemned. The Vatican's 2017 meeting with leaders of the Grand Lodge of Italy, though inconclusive, marked the first high-level dialogue in centuries. Behind closed doors, a new generation of priests and Masons are reframing debates. If 18th century conflicts were about power and 19th century disputes about secularism, perhaps 21st century discussions could focus on shared values like charity and ethical living. The stubborn divide reveals deeper questions about authority and secrecy. Can an institution built on papal infallibility coexist with one that elevates individual conscience? Can a church that proclaims its truths openly make peace with a fraternity that guards its rituals closely? The answer may lie not in grand declarations, but in local compromises, where Masonic food drives serve Catholic parishes, or where lodge members volunteer at diocesan events without flaunting affiliations. After 300 years of mutual suspicion, small acts of trust could rebuild bridges burned long ago. Behind the solemn rituals of Freemasonry lies a hidden current, an underground river of esoteric thought connecting it to ancient streams of mystical wisdom. The fraternity's symbols and ceremonies whisper of deeper affiliations with secret societies like the Rosicrucians and the alchemical traditions of medieval Europe. Consider the Masonic obsession with sacred geometry, the compass tracing perfect circles, the square forming right angles. These aren't just tools of stonemasons, they mirror the precise diagrams found in Rosicrucian manuscripts where geometric shapes were believed to hold the keys to spiritual transformation. The 17th century Rosicrucian manifestos, with their visions of an invisible college of enlightened adepts, share striking parallels with Masonic lodges. Both served as shelters for seekers navigating religious persecution while pursuing universal truths beyond dogma. Alchemy's fingerprints are equally visible in Masonic ritual. When an initiate undergoes symbolic death and rebirth in the Master Mason degree, he reenacts the alchemical magnum opus, the process of dissolving base matter to reveal its purified essence. The Masonic ladder climbing toward enlightenment mirrors the alchemist's stairway of ascension, each rung representing a higher stage of wisdom. Even the color symbolism resonates. The black and white checkerboard floor echoes the alchemical dance of opposites, negrido and albedo, darkness and light, that must be reconciled to achieve spiritual gold. Historical figures like Elias Ashmole personified this overlap, a devoted alchemist who transcribed medieval chemical texts by day and helped transform Freemasonry from operative craft to philosophical pursuit by night. Some scholars argue these connections aren't coincidental but intentional, that Masonry became a vessel for preserving endangered esoteric knowledge during Europe's age of witch hunts and heresy trials. The enigmatic chimical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, a pivotal Rosicrucian text, describes an initiatic journey startlingly similar to Masonic degree ceremonies, complete with symbolic trials and temple imagery. Both traditions share a common ancestry in the mystery schools of antiquity, where candidates underwent dramatic rites to awaken higher consciousness. The Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff finds eerie precursors in Egyptian Osiris myths and Dionysian resurrection dramas, suggesting these rituals tap into archetypes far older than medieval guilds. Yet the relationship remains deliberately ambiguous. Unlike openly esoteric orders, mainstream Freemasonry insists its teachings are moral, not mystical, a stance that has fueled endless speculation. Conspiracy theorists point to figures like the Comte de Saint-Germain, an 18th-century adventurer who mingled with Masonic lodges while claiming to possess the elixir of life as evidence of hidden alchemical agendas. More credible are documents like the cipher manuscripts linking Masonic higher degrees to Rosicrucian circles in Germanic courts. Even the structure of Masonic initiation, where candidates progress through degrees like chemical stages, mirrors alchemy's stepwise refinement of consciousness. The most compelling case for Masonry's esoteric roots may lie in its adaptability. Just as alchemists encoded spiritual truths in chemical metaphors, Masonic rituals use architectural symbolism to convey inner transformation. The lost word, sought in Masonic legend, parallels the alchemist's quest for the philosopher's stone, not literal objects, but metaphors for divine wisdom. This interpretive flexibility allowed Freemasonry to survive where more overtly mystical groups were crushed. A lodge could discuss Plato's forms under the guise of discussing stonework, or explore Kabbalistic tree of life symbolism while ostensibly studying guild bylaws. Modern scholars remain divided. Some view Masonic esotericism as window dressing, moral lessons wrapped in mystical trappings to make them memorable. Others see a deliberate veiling of hermetic secrets, with each degree revealing another layer of an ancient gnosis. The truth likely bridges both views. Freemasonry may not guard a singular secret, but its rituals undeniably offer a methodology for seekers, a way to transmute the lead of ignorance into the gold of understanding, one symbolic tool at a time. Whether handing down genuine occult lineages or simply echoing humanity's timeless hunger for hidden knowledge, the craft's greatest gift may be its ability to turn every initiate into both builder and alchemist, simultaneously constructing inner temples and distilling wisdom from the raw material of experience. The moment the phrase blood oath enters a conversation about Freemasonry, pulses quicken and imaginations run wild. But how much of this dark imagery stems from fact versus fevered speculation? The controversy traces back to 1826, when disgruntled ex-Mason William Morgan vanished after threatening to publish an exposé detailing higher degree rituals. His posthumously released Illustrations of Masonry described dramatic penalties, symbolic throat-cutting and heart removal embedded in initiation oaths. What few realize is that these passages weren't literal threats, but medieval-style allegories about the gravity of betrayal. Masonic scholars point to operative stonemasons' guild oaths, where vivid metaphors emphasize the sacred trust of trade secrets. A 14th-century Strasbourg stonemason's oath swore that violators should have their hearts torn out, yet no records exist of actual executions. The fraternity preserved these archaic formulations not as blueprints for violence, but as psychological anchors, ritual theater meant to engrave ethical boundaries deeper than mundane promises ever could. Modern leaks like the infamous Taxil hoax of 1885 only muddied the waters. French journalist Leo Taxil fabricated elaborate satanic Masonic rituals, complete with devils and black masses, claiming insider knowledge. His lurid tales spread globally before he admitted the entire scheme was anti-clerical satire. Even today, distorted fragments of Taxil's inventions resurface online as proof of occult Masonic practices. The fraternity's reluctance to publicly rebut every accusation fuels misconceptions, but their stance reflects a principled dilemma. How does an organization predicated on gradual revelation defend itself without violating its own ethos of discretion? Verified ritual texts like those in the Scottish Rite's 19th-century archives reveal a different story. The so-called blood oaths are invariably symbolic, red ribbons representing accountability rather than violence, or chalices of wine standing in for life's essence. In the Royal Arch degree's dramatic reenactment of rebuilding Solomon's temple, candidates shed light on hidden truths, not blood. Anthropologists recognize these as classic examples of liminal ritual, intense sensory experiences designed to mark irreversible personal transformation. Comparable rites appear in college fraternities, military inductions, and even religious confirmations worldwide. The debate touches on fundamental questions about secrecy itself. Societies from the Eleusinian mysteries to the skull and bones have guarded initiation rites, recognizing that profound experiences lose potency when reduced to Wikipedia summaries. Freemasonry's current grandmasters argue that their rituals aren't concealed to hide dark deeds, but to preserve their transformative impact for those who earn access through commitment. As one Utah Lodge master phrased it, "You don't read spoilers before seeing a masterpiece film. Some truths demand the context of earned understanding." This perspective collides with modern transparency expectations, creating a tension that may never fully resolve. What often gets lost in the sensationalism is the ritual's intended effect. Former critics who later undergo degrees frequently describe unexpected emotional resonance, the symbolic penalties evoking not fear, but profound reflection on integrity's cost. The horror of these rites, when experienced authentically, proves to be moral gravity rather than gore. Like a shaman's ordeal or a knight's vigil, the discomfort serves a purpose, searing principles into memory far deeper than any casual promise ever could. The real scandal may lie not in Masonic secrecy, but in our culture's dwindling capacity for meaningful initiation. In an era of viral hot takes and instant gratification, we've forgotten how societies traditionally marked transitions from childhood to adulthood, from ignorance to wisdom. The Masonic approach, steeped in centuries of psychological insight, suggests that some truths can't be tweeted. They must be lived step by measured step in the company of those who have walked the path before. Whether one finds this antiquated or profound says less about the fraternity than about our own fragmented relationship with ritual's power. Centuries have passed since the first stonemasons gathered in shadowy chapels to enact their solemn rites, yet the allure of Freemasonry's rituals remains as potent as ever. These ceremonies are more than relics of a bygone era. They are living traditions, continuously adapting while preserving their core mysteries. The rituals endure not because they conceal dark truths, but because they speak to something universal, the human longing for meaning, for connection, and for a structured path toward self-improvement in an increasingly chaotic world. Whether performed in a grand temple in London or a modest lodge in Nairobi, these rites bind generations together, offering a rare continuity in our fractured modern age. Yet Freemasonry's true power lies in its duality. It is both timeless and adaptable. The same symbols that once guided medieval craftsmen now inspire software engineers and artists, their lessons repurposed but never diluted. The square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the rough and perfect ashlars, these are not static artifacts but dynamic tools, as relevant to ethical dilemmas in the digital age as they were to stonecutters shaping cathedrals. Even the fraternity's challenges, declining membership in the West, booming interest in the global South, reflect broader cultural shifts, proving that Masonry has always been a mirror as much as a beacon. For those intrigued by this enigmatic tradition, the next step is simple but profound: engage. Many lodges now offer open houses or educational events, demystifying their practices without betraying their secrets. Books like Christopher Hoddap's Freemasons for Dummies or Margaret Jacobs' Living the Enlightenment provide accessible gateways for the curious. Yet the deeper secrets, those transformative moments of insight, can't be found in any text. They emerge in the quiet after a ritual, in the shared glance between brothers, in the slow realization that these ancient symbols are keys to unlocking something far more precious than hidden knowledge, a clearer understanding of oneself. So we end with a question, not to provoke wild speculation, but to invite reflection. What secrets might still lie undiscovered? Not the sensational fantasies of conspiracy theories, but the quiet truths woven into Masonry's rituals, lessons about integrity, mortality, and the bonds that unite us across time. The answer isn't locked away in some vault. It's waiting in plain sight, etched into every symbol, whispered in every oath for those willing to look beyond the surface and begin the work. The real mystery isn't whether Freemasonry holds secrets, it's whether we're ready to discover what they reveal about ourselves.